So welcome you all from EKI Energy Services Limited. We are hosting an engaging panel discussion on COP28 industry expectations for a robust carbon market. So the agenda for this webinar, it aims to explore the expectations of industries regarding the establishment and fortification of a robust carbon market by providing a dynamic platform for dialogue among diverse stakeholders. This webinar seeks to unravel the complexities, aspirations, and practical strategies that will shape the industry's role in achieving climate goals. Topics we are going to cover today are current landscape and market situation, policy and regulatory considerations, comments on pre-COP28 expectations, and at the last, particularly for market perspective. So each speaker is going to speak for 10 to 15 minutes. Afterwards, at the last, we will have a question and answer session. About EKI, so EKI, also called as Enking International in the climate sector globally, is a leading carbon credit project developer and supplier across the globe. It's an Indore-based company which is listed at Bombay Stock Exchange. EKI is into the business for the last 15 years and is a global carbon market leader with deep expertise in the realm of climate change, carbon offset solutions, and carbon asset management. The company is today present in 16 nations, having 3,500 clients across 40 plus countries worldwide. As on date, EKI has applied more than 200 million offsets. About me, I'm Chairman and Managing Director in EKI, founded this organization during year 2008, and I'm Certified Energy Auditor and Manager, and further did many certifications into the energy and environment domain. Distinguished industry professionals, as the panelist, we are going to have Mr. Pedro from International Emission Trading Association. He is International Policy Advisor. Then at the second, we would be having Nithyanandam, Yuvaraj, Dinesh, Babu. He is Executive Director at Climate Action Data Trust, Singapore. Then afterwards, we would be having Mr. Prashant Tiwari, who is Group Head, Carbon Asset Management at Tata Power Limited. And at the last, we would be having Mr. R.R. Rajni. He is Distinguished Fellow and Program Director at TERI. About the context for this specific webinar, I wish to let you know, because we would be having various delegates who would be having knowledge related to the carbon markets at different level. So there may be a few delegates who would be having a very basic knowledge. There may be who do not have any knowledge, and maybe advanced level knowledge holders would be there as our delegate. So to start with, I will in next 2-3 slides, I will do cover the basic information about the carbon markets and what is happening within India, and then after we'll be having a opportunity to listen our other speakers. So 1 ton CO2 emission reduction, either avoidance or absorption from the atmosphere, used to yield 1 carbon credit, and which is an environmental commodity traded globally. It is considered to be the biggest commodity sector to grow in this century. There are 7 greenhouse gases, out of which more than 95% projects comes from first 2 gases, carbon dioxide and methane, while other gases we do have are nitrous oxide, HFC, PFC, SF6 and NF3. So if you do any business activity with the help of which, either if you are able to avoid or absorb any of the 7 greenhouse gas, then we would be able to earn 1 ton CO2 equivalent. There are these carbon credits used to be consumed for 2 different applications. One is to achieve carbon neutrality, another one is to achieve net zero goals. The major difference between the two is in the case of carbon neutrality, we can buy any kind of carbon credit, either avoidance or removal, while in case of net zero emission goals achievement, we only removal based carbon credits are the best one to get opted for. There are two different markets. One is the voluntary carbon markets, another one is the compliance carbon market. Compliance can also be divided into two. One is international compliance carbon market, driven through different um, uh, treaties or different regulations like CORSIA, Paris Agreement, or CBAM, while at the national level, majority of the industrial nations or developing industrial nations are going to have their own national emission trading scheme. In India, we do have exposure to the carbon markets since its inception. So these are the different options which will do exist in a very near timeline. So the first one is a domestic emission trading scheme, compliance sector, which will be empowered by Energy Conservation Act 2022. Another one will be the domestic emission trading scheme voluntary sector, again empowered by Energy Conservation Act 22, which had been recently passed during December 22. We do have domestic voluntary sector, although it is negligible, but it's growing. We do have international voluntary sector. That means the programs like CDM, VCS, Gold Standard, GCC, IRX. These are the programs which do allow credits or the projects from India to get registered and to be sold in the international voluntary carbon markets. And India is one of the top nation in this specific sector. Then we do have CORSIA scheme, which is going to get implemented from within India from 1 January 2027, but globally it is going to get kicked off from the compliance period is going to get kicked off from 1 January 2024. Further, we do have Article 6.2 sector, wherein Indian government had declared 13 different sectors. So if any country will do sign an MOU with the government of India, and if they will do invest, their private sector or government sector will do invest in any of the 13 different sectors, then the Indian government do not have any problem to transfer the credits with corresponding adjustment certificate to that specific company. The MOU. So 28, it is anticipated that Indian government will do sign MOU with various other developing or developed nations, so like Japan, Singapore, South Korea, and the further talks with many European countries is there in the conversation. So it is being anticipated that at least 2 to 3 such kind of MOUs would be signed by Government of India. Then under Article 6.4, although Government of India had not declared the sectors, but it is very likely that 13 sectors which are being declared under Article 6.2 definitely will do take their position under Article 6.4 also. And further, the regulations related to Article 6.4 or guidelines procedures are not very much clear, and it is being anticipated during COP28 Indian government will do, or all the nations through supervisory body or through COP28 will do offer this. Then CBAM, many companies in India are going to get exposed to the CBAM mechanism imposed by European Union or all the exporters to the European Union, and various companies are there in India which is going to get exposed with this carbon tax mechanism. The joint credit mechanism is also one of the mechanism wherein from 2024, probably Government of India will do sign an MOU under Article 6.2, and thereafterwards the JCM mechanism, joint credit mechanism, will do get its position within India. And recently, Green Credit Program and EcoMark are the two new programs which had been started by government of, which is going to get started by Government of India through CPCB and MOFCC. So these are some basic information which I was looking to share with you. Further, now I will do like to start the presentations from our first speaker, Mr. Pedro Venzon. Mr. Pedro is International Policy Advisor at IETA, where he covers international policy development on global carbon markets and Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Pedro also co-leads IETA's Business Partnership for Market Implementation. This initiative supports the World Bank's the Preparedness for Market Readiness, PMI, and provides capacity building for the public and private sector to support governments in Asia, Africa, and Latin America in developing more efficient policies and helping businesses engage with carbon markets. Prior to joining IETA, he specialized in international trade and finance with an emphasis on sustainability. Pedro holds a bachelor degree in architecture and urban planning from Mackenzie University of Sao Paulo, Brazil, and having a master degree in international affairs from the Graduate Institute, Geneva. So, for another message I wish to share with the delegates, here is which you will be able to see in the further slides also. And if you wish to get the PPTs presented by the speakers, we will do email the same to you if you do fill this specific form after this event. So now I request Mr. Pedro to take the floor and enlighten our delegates related to the COP28.
For the introduction, Manish, and also for the invitation. I would like to share my slides. So briefly, I would like to, for those that, just a minute here. I think you are seeing this, right?
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay, thank you. So for those who don't know IETA, we are a non-profit group, a private sector association with a vision of a common global carbon price around the world that is basically developed through the integration of carbon markets with high environmental integrity. So we have members involved in all the different sectors of carbon markets. So since the supply side until the demand side and all the intermediaries as well. So we need to work for the markets. And how do you do that? We basically try to help governments to develop their policies and also sharing best practices and knowledge transfer. And we also partner with international organizations such as the UNFCCC, the OECD, the World Bank, among others. So our mission is basically to engage with these businesses around the world to help them achieve their climate commitments and also align these commitments with the Paris Agreement's goals, and also to establish effective market-based solutions that are environmentally robust, fair, open, efficient, accountable, and consistent across boundaries. So starting to talk about COP and Article 6, I think it's important to give a bit of an overview. So I would like to go through the main subjects that will be discussed this year. As you might know, this year we are completing the first global stock take, which is basically considering calculating how far we are from achieving our Paris Agreement goals. So the current NDCs, I think it's already clear. The UNFCCC released a report last fall that there is an ambition gap. So there is a gap between the current NDCs and what we need to achieve. But we still also need to face with a finance gap. So the amount of resources that we need to see invested in climate action to allow us to achieve our climate commitments. So there are two different gaps here that's important to be aware, and this is something that we are already aware before COP. What we don't know what will happen basically will be the outcome of this first global stock take. So what countries will do with these gaps and how they will tackle this to achieve the Paris Agreement goals. So this is something that that we need to follow closely. Also, in terms of loss and damage, this discussion was the main focus in Sharm el-Sheikh. So there, they decided to move forward and operationalize a fund and establish a transitional committee to discuss how this fund would be structured. So this year, this transitional committee, they discussed the operationalization of the fund, where it would be hosted, who would be, which countries would have access to the resources of the fund. And the progress was really slow. They only managed to reach an agreement on the recommendations the beginning of November, because of the usual rift between developed and developing countries. This is something that that is not new for us that are following these discussions, because basically developed countries, they are more resistant to provide resources and also to define which countries would be able to access these resources. And when it comes to developing and emerging economies, they also want to have access to these resources, considering the historical emissions between developed and developing world. So this is something that is important, because eventually the polarization in this discussion could impact other negotiations and the mood of the delegations. But considering that they finally achieved an agreement, we expect this to move forward more smoothly in Dubai. Also, high-level announcements, I think it's really important for us to be aware. So there is this global pledge for tripling the renewable generation capacity by 2030 to 11 terawatts. This is a voluntary commitment. The COP presidency is supporting this global pledge, and a lot of countries are also supporting, so we don't expect to see a lot of issues regarding these discussions. But in terms of the phase out of unabated fossil fuels, this is a more complicated discussion. The COP presidency at the beginning of the year, they made a statement where they mentioned the phase out of fossil fuel emissions. They were really criticized by some civil society groups. Over the year, they changed a bit the framing of this declaration to phase out, to phase down fossil fuels. But now we have this idea of phase out of unabated fossil fuels, and the definition of unabated is still unclear. So we expect to see a lot of discussions over this term, and it will for sure will not be easy negotiation here. The COP presidency is also really involved in VCM and trying to promote the high integrity of this market. So they are encouraging standards to align on a high integrity joint declaration. IETA is supporting them with their members, trying to coordinate this with their members. We should have a side event on this at our pavilion. So I invite you also for those that will be at COP to join us there. And there are 3 non-negotiated outcomes on the voluntary carbon market that the COP presidency plans to promote and work during this COP, which is end-to-end integrity, high integrity transactions, and the interplay of Article 6 and the VCM. When it comes to Article 6 at COP, I think it's important to highlight that since Glasgow, the negotiations around Article 6 became much more technical and operational. So the fact that there is a less political burden over these negotiations allows the parties to move forward better and more efficiently, focusing on the details of these mechanisms. In terms of cross-cutting issues between the 2 mechanisms, the Article 6.2 and the 6.4, we have authorization. So this will be a key discussion, this COP. So when an authorization could be eventually changed, or when a country could eventually revoke the status of an authorization. This is critical also for the private sector, because it eventually could impact investments. And in terms of registries, also is a cross-cutting issues, how this interoperability will work. So the integration between the national registry, also the international registry, and the Article 6.4 mechanism registry. So how this would interact is also a key aspect of the discussions this year. In terms of specific discussions, Article 6.2 is something that is already moving forward. So countries are already starting to establish their MOUs and eventually authorize units between them. But we expect to see things still being discussed at COP. Mainly regarding reporting templates, the review of reporting information, also how this could deal with inconsistencies when what's reported is not the same thing that should be reported when the reviewing is being when the review is performed. And also regarding which information could be classified as confidential. In terms of Article 6.4, I think the key aspect here was last week when the Article 6.4 supervisory body managed to achieve an agreement on methodologies and removals recommendations. So these are two key documents to operationalize the mechanism, and if they are adopted by the CMA now, the first methodologies could be eventually be approved under Article 6.4 in the first half of 2024, and eventually the first credits to be issued by the end of 2024. Also, emission avoidance and conservation enhancement is another key area that we expect to see discussions. This is a new category under Article 6.4. Some parties are pushing to the inclusion of this new category. Other parties are not seeing this as a priority because most of activities could fall eventually under emission reduction or emission removal. But this is something that generates confusion, and we expect to see more discussion, and we expect to see more clarity on this after Dubai. In terms of market expectations, the global stock take, I think there is also another gap that is important to highlight here, that is the cooperation gap. We have seen some countries already engaging with Article 6, but this cooperation needs to increase. I think this is something that IETA is promoting, and I think it's key for carbon markets to play a bigger role in this process of helping countries achieve their climate commitments. The voluntary carbon market is important. The integrity initiatives are also helping this market to evolve, and for sure it will play a role in this process. But in the long term, I think it's really important to highlight that we need compliance markets, we need Article 6 cooperation, and we expect to see this being promoted also by parties when it comes to the outcome of the global stock take. Article 6, Article 6.2, I think the most important aspects here would be much more related to the announcements of countries and not necessarily related to the negotiations. As I mentioned, negotiations will still happen in the coming years. We expect to see more negotiations in terms of registries and authorizations, but eventually this is a mechanism that's already happening, and parties need to be aware of that and need to engage from now on. So we should keep an eye on parties that are already active buyers, for example, Japan, Switzerland, Singapore, also like some host countries that are already authorizing transfers, Ghana, Thailand, and these other countries like that already expressed interest in becoming buyers really soon, or they are already establishing MOUs, which is the United Arab Emirates and Norway as well, but New Zealand and Saudi Arabia. So these are pavilions that we should follow up, because we expect to see some announcements regarding cooperative approach there. In terms of 6.4, we expect that these recommendations that were forwarded by the supervisory body to be approved by the CMA. We need to remember that a lot of members from the CMA are also part of the supervisory body, and this could eventually facilitate the approval. We don't expect the opinions of these actors to change from one week to another. So we expect these recommendations to be approved relatively smoothly, and it will allow the mechanism to move forward and become at least operational by 2024. And cross-cutting issues, these are key topics that the private sector needs more clarity in terms of authorization. We need to ensure that this will be limited, really limited to specific cases. We need to ensure also that these authorization chains are well defined and in advance to provide market confidence for the investments that we expect to see coming from the private sector. Also, revocations should be done only in exceptional cases. And in terms of clarity, or in terms of interoperability of registries, I think it's really important to provide clarity how this would happen. Also avoid overlay perspective requirements, because otherwise the mechanism will be too costly and would not be so efficient. With that, my final comment here is I would like to share these slides after with you, of course, but I would like to highlight that that IETA now has a platform to share all the updates and resources that we are developing around COP. So now we already have there a document with our priorities, and also a document, a recent paper that we released on Article 6. This is an update of a paper that we released last year, and it tries to discuss a bit how governments can implement NDCs cooperatively and encourage private sector investment. So with that, I would like to conclude my presentation, and I'm looking forward to the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro, for very insightful information related to the Article 6.2 and 6.4 and the priorities which the presidency UAE government do have for COP28, which includes a very important point which is related to the voluntary carbon markets, and which is suffering from two issues. One is related to the quality of carbon credits, and another one is related to the greenwashing issue. So it is very interesting topic which you have covered, and thanks for the information shared with our delegates. So next, I wish to introduce Mr. Yuvaraj Dinesh Babu. Mr. Yuvaraj is currently the Executive Director at Climate Data Action Trust. He is based out at Singapore. Mr. Dinesh worked with Ernst & Young as its Executive Director. He led the World Bank funded State Bank of India, operated 5 years for multi-million-dollar project related to connected solar rooftop PV technical assistance program for 17 states in India. He possesses over 29 years of extensive national and overseas experience in carbon markets, GHG mitigation technologies, assessment, advisory, financing, clean energy strategy, strategic planning, risk ratings and deployment, policy review and framework development, and capacity building in the field of renewable energy, energy efficiency, and climate change. So I welcome Mr. Yuvaraj to enlighten our delegates to know more about the webinar topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manish, for the generous introduction and also inviting me to share some views. So as usual, the topic is very close to my heart. And the current hat I'm wearing is more from the not-for-profit aspect of the carbon market, which is a bit odd to hear. What could be not-for-profit for the carbon markets? So I had a few slides, but if Devyani can show those slides, that would be great. I have some issues in sharing my screen, but I can't thank Pedro enough in terms of setting the scene on today's webinar, because it's more to understand what would be the expectations on all the aspects related to carbon markets, which was very perfectly summarized by Pedro. Largely is that the carbon market readiness has been there by the market for I would say at least a couple of years, if not more, in terms of how the Article 6 could take shape. And as it was stated in the previous presentation, that the UAE president's priority is on the VCM's integrity and the transparency, and how that could further help interplay with the Article 6. I think those are the very important points I think most of the participants in today's webinar would like to know. So the good and bad news is that Article 6.2 is already kind of seen to be operationalized in certain aspects, though it is early stage. As again Pedro said, the difference between announcement and the actual realization, a lot of difference. The kind of agreements and the MOUs that you see on the news signed between two countries doesn't immediately mean that the projects are happening and the transactions are happening, largely because the rules of the game are still being worked out between those two countries who have agreed to procure. And already the challenges are being surfacing in terms of how those issues related to authorization and revocation, which again the previous presentation mentioned, how serious or how lenient it would be, and how that would give a clear signal to the investors for a long-term investment. I think these are the issues that definitely COP28 to some extent would try to address, and I could also see that the topic is not on a high priority on the negotiators, that I understand, but on the operational side, there will be very many areas of discussions that would happen in a way that the private sector's participation will be all-time high, definitely in UAE, and for also the uncertainty that is being showcased for certain sectors in the voluntary carbon market would also be seen highly debated in the corridors of COP28, largely due to the transparency issue, the integrity issue, the double counting, the over-issuance, etc. But I think this is the right time that the market is picking up the right topics in terms of seeing how the carbon market can unify for the first time from the voluntary to the compliance. And this interplay is a essential topic, and this could be a long term or a long duration topic. You will see many use cases coming up, many kind of actual projects that are going to address certain issues which have been never addressed before. Very many innovative financial structures are going to happen. As we speak, we are talking about how the monetization of the forward carbon credits are going to define in the digitalization form in terms of tokenization for the banks to lend and participate in even in the blended finance as well. So there is going to be a lot of interest in carbon markets in terms of how to structure the carbon market in terms of point number one is what is the interplay between the voluntary and the compliance market, and also how the ITMOS by itself is going to create the market from the trading perspective, because today we are talking only about one country selling and one country buying, but you would see again in COP28 a few discussions are all going to come up in terms of how the secondary and the tertiary transactions of ITMOS are going to be designed and implemented. For example, Singapore is now in the process of establishing its national carbon registry and has already kind of identified and recognized few voluntary standards to supply carbon credits under the carbon tax regime, which kicks off next year with the 5% carbon credits to be allowed. So therefore, the countries like Singapore, the kind of recognition of these standards become an extremely positive and encouraging step, because that gives a kind of a one step closer in terms of the cooperation, which is a gap that was again mentioned in the previous slide. So there are very many moving parts, I would say, in terms of how this COP28 is going to be a kind of a place of very encouraging discussions for different types of stakeholders. I'm not sure what, I'm sure that at least there'll be many different kind of participants in today's webinar who are trying to understand whether 6.4 is going to give a lot of clarity during COP28, whether 6.2 guidance on the authorization revocation should be finalized, and whether voluntary carbon markets interplay with Article 6 is going to be formalized in this COP. So I don't think you will have all that concluded in this COP, but you will see a lot of discussions and debate both officially at the same time on the private corridor that is going to happen through many side events and many discussions that would trigger new ideas and new kind of innovation in bringing out. So to that concept, I thought I will show you exactly this slide. I wanted to spend a few minutes that it is very relevant for the discussions that are going to happen in carbon markets, especially during COP, largely because of the transparency and the environmental integrity which we are talking about. So if you could see this, many of you would have seen this if you are closely watching what World Bank's climate warehouse has been doing for the last 3 years. And me being the executive director of the Climate Action Data Trust is one such initiative that came out of this climate warehouse, which is very closely working with the UAE VCM body, as well as with the government of Japan's recently launched Article 6 Implementation Center, where the kind of emphasis for transparency and integrity has been really cut out. And there is going to be a lot of work packages that are going to be announced and launched by IGS Japan, who's implementing the Article 6 Center. So the overall ecosystem is moving towards digitalization. I think most of you would agree that the kind of registry infrastructure moving forward has to be on the digitalization aspect of it. I'm not saying blockchain is the only solution for the digitalization, but in terms of the benefits that the blockchain brings, this is one area to watch out in the future to become more resource efficient, and at the same time be more closely watching the whole cycle of the projects that are going to issue carbon credits and ICMOs or whatever units that you are handling within India as well as outside and the international market. So from that angle, I would like to inform you or update you that even the recent expression of interest by UNFCCC for inviting registry service suppliers to submit the expression of interest mentions about the interoperability and the tracking, the digital tracking and the distributed ledger features, which means that even the UNFCCC is a bit moving very close to the digitalization of the registry as compared to a simple registry functions that basis which the CDM registry has been functioning for more than two decades now. So from that angle, we see a lot of emphasis while discussing about the registry infrastructure, the templates, the reporting template, which Pedro mentioned in the previous slide, how that is going to happen within the negotiating context, as well as the private sector interactions in terms of how the registry functionalities would be designed will be very interesting to watch during COP28 as well. And just a couple of days ago, I had a privilege to see the presentation by UNFCCC on its plan to launch the different types of registries, especially supplying the registry access to all the countries who are unable to develop registry on their own. So from that angle, the kind of UNFCCC's movement towards helping countries to have a direct access to their own registry, which is provided by UNFCCC, is one option, which will be debated and discussed as the development moves forward on the international registry. And of course, the 6.4 registry would be an independent top-down registry, which is fully managed and kind of functionalized and parameterized by the supervisory body. And then we are talking about the central reporting, accounting and reporting platform. So the aim of Climate Action Data Trust towards all this registry related aspect. I'm focusing a bit on the previous slide, please. I'm focusing more on the registry, largely because the ultimate object of Climate Action Data Trust is to basically link all the independent and the compliance registries alike and give universal access without any fee or a business model to all the stakeholders, irrespective of whatever activities that they have been involved, and therefore try to provide them the kind of ability to understand the flow of information across the national and the independent registries like Vera Gold Standard and different countries like India, Bhutan, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, etc. And therefore, the ultimate aim is to see how the Climate Action Data Trust could be able to provide the assistance towards the interplay of both the compliance and the independent markets and the standards, and therefore try to also move beyond the aspect of how the Article 6 reporting could be enabled for the national registries to the UNFCCC, and how the transactions between the countries could be operationalized, and how the kind of new financing structures like the tokenization you're seeing on the slide right now, how the tokenization could lead to or result in new innovative financing structures to scale the climate finance. So you'll be seeing a lot of such debate and activities and actions that is going to happen at COP28. But officially, I couldn't explain much better than what the previous presenter gave you a summary. But from my end, I would emphasize more on the infrastructure for the carbon markets would be the topic that is the most favorite for me. That I'm going to watch very closely, and I would also urge you to watch it very closely for three reasons. One is to understand the level of engagement between the independent market and the compliance market. That's number one. And then number two, therefore, the kind of emphasis on how the digitalization is going to occur and how it is going to benefit. And the last is basically, therefore, how it is going to result in new and innovative financing structures. So that is the overall kind of expectations that I personally carry when I travel to COP28 next week. Thank you so much, Manish, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Yuvaraj, for the detailed information related to the future registry system or the expectations from the COP28. So the next, I would like to invite our next speaker. Just a minute, Mr. Prashant Tiwari. He's working as Group Head Carbon Asset Management in Tata Power Renewable Energy Limited. His role is to generate and manage carbon credits and offsets for the projects, eligible projects, while ensuring alignment with the company's broader carbon neutrality objectives. Looking at the academics, he had done BE in mechanical engineering and PGDM in operations management, having total experience of 20 years while working in the public sector companies like Hindustan Aeronautics Limited and Bharat Heavy Electricals Limited. Have worked in diverse fields such as construction and commissioning, MIS and planning, risk management, business excellence, etc. So I welcome Mr. Tiwari to enlighten our delegates to speak about expectations from COP28. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manish, and good evening, everybody. And I really feel very happy to be part of such an elite discussion panel and the audience also. I don't have any PPT to present here. I have some points to make. My submission here today is to let you to let this audience and panel know the expectation from the industry side, from an industry which is seen as the forerunner of the climate change activities which are going to happen in next 100 years to 200 years. I am from Tata Power, and I work in TTPREL, Tata Power Renewable Energy Limited, which is the vertical which works in renewable energy generation, and we have around installed capacity of around 4 gigawatt. And when we talk about climate change, the climate change abatement is going to come from the electricity sector. We all know. And the targets which we have set, the targets which the UNFCCC has set, that is 2 degrees by end of the century, to limit the global warming by 2 degrees by end of century. There are sub interests which need to be taken care of. Interest of the globe, interest of the people, interest of the industries also. The interest can be long term or ultra long term, if there is such a term, where we talk about the future generations. We talk about the earth, the planet. Then there are interests which are kind of medium terms. For our nations, like India wants to be a developed country in next 2 to 3 decades. We have set a target of becoming 5 trillion economy, then 25 trillion economy. These are medium term goals set by the countries for their own people. Then there are short term goals, short term interests, which is like to help the poor in a country, in a developing country like India, Brazil, African countries. There are people who are hit hard by the climate change activities. So there are short-term interests for the people, for the immediate people of the country. When we talk about climate change and the carbon neutrality actions to achieve the carbon neutrality, there are those interests which are to be taken care of. So in a nutshell, the carbon neutrality should be achieved while keeping all the 3 interests in the perspective. Tata Power, of course, Tata Power is there for more than 100 years. Our first plant was commissioned in early 19th century, and we are going to be there for maybe next 1,000 years. So yes, Tata Power can contribute in all the interests, in the long-term interest. It can contribute for the short-term interest also. So now, when we think of COP28, there have been multiple COPs earlier also. COP27, we know what happened there. COP26 also. Paris Agreement was signed in 2015, and after that, it has been almost 8-9 years, and we are seeing the developments. So when we are going for COP28, now from Tata Power point of view, from India point of view, a lot of expectations are there. India, which is energy poor in more prudent sense rather than economically poor, I'll say India is an energy poor country. If you look at the average energy consumption of the globe, of Earth, we are not near even half of the average energy consumption of the world. So when we want, every country wants to be developed. When we want to achieve that development level, our energy demands are going to be way higher than where we are today. I'm not comparing with countries like US or Canada, but if you see our numbers compared to countries like Brazil, South Africa, China, we are not even 1/3 of those countries in many ways in terms of energy consumption. So when we develop as a country and our energy demands are going to go higher, we need to see that our carbon neutrality targets are also not reached. So our development should not be jeopardized. Our poor people who have who may be having difficulties in raising even 2 meals a day, they should not be hit, as well as the generations to come, maybe after 50 years, maybe after 100 years, they are also not hit. So we need to go in renewables in a very big way. That's my take on this. And I was part of a discussion in our recent strategy cycle, in Tata Power strategy cycle, and as per the recent report, if we want to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 at a global level, then India has to invest $90 billion per year for next around 27 years. So that's a crazy amount of money. We are not even investing 10% of that today. So where will that money come from? That's the question. One source of fund can be the carbon credits, and that's why we are hoping that this COP28 will come out with some positive solutions, with some positive news for the industry. I have noted down a few points, which if you are a part of the discussion in COP28, you can take it up from our side. The first point is, recently you all know that there are some standards, some voluntary standards like Vera Gold Standard. They have stopped accepting the large-scale renewable solar and wind projects for registration under their mechanisms. CDM, of course, it stopped working after 2020. The fate of all the renewable energy projects is in not very good shape. And as I said earlier, if we want to get carbon neutral by 2050 as a world, we need that much investment in renewable energy, $90 billion. That money cannot come from banks. That money cannot come from the government, which is still dealing with its own problems. So we need to have continuation of the solar and wind projects in the new mechanism also. Whenever Article 6.4 comes into force, we should make sure that large-scale solar and wind projects are part of it. You may be hearing the news about all the solar and wind energy developers in India. Their ROE is in single digits. In many cases, their ROE is in negative. So, saying that this sector has evolved, it does not need financial support, it's not true. The carbon credit benefit should be there, and there should be enhanced benefit of carbon credit to all the developers of solar and wind. The second point which I want this COP28 to address is closing the discussion on Article 6.4. We cannot keep on debating on the climate issues for decades. So this is the time we need to come out with procedural guidelines, with operational guidelines on how the successor of CDM will work. What methodologies will be there, what technologies will be there under it, and we need to roll it out as far as possible. Pedro, of course, he is very hopeful that by end of next year, first issuance will be there, and I really am very happy and if that happens. So we need to close on it very quickly. And Indian carbon market, Indian carbon trading scheme is also going to come in next year maybe, because the government has come up with a draft guideline this year, and there is a lot of confusion in government departments also, because unless 6.4 clarity is there, is not there, our government also cannot come up with some rigid frameworks. It needs to be again go for a revision after 6.4 procedures comes. So as soon as the Article 6.4 procedures are formulated and made public, in Indian carbon market, our draft policy also will not be finalized. So that's the news I got from the industry, from the government panelists. The third point is a lot of emerging technologies are coming, in which Tata Power is also playing a big role. Mainly, these technologies are from the energy sector. There are 4 or 5 sectors which are hard to abate sectors and which contribute most to the global pollution, global emissions. One is, of course, the power sector. The steel sector is there. Transport sector is there. Then buildings be it residential, be it commercial, the buildings, they use energy for their needs. That is one sector. In all these 3-4 sectors, Tata Power can play a big role. We are coming up with EV chargers, electric vehicle chargers. We are coming up with pump storage for our renewable sectors. We are coming up with battery storage. We are planning offshore winds. We are also planning carbon capture and storage for our thermal plants, which are going to retire after some time, or maybe it's part of our larger strategy to become carbon neutral by 2045 by retiring all those thermal assets. But if newer technologies like these can be supported by the carbon credit benefits, and not only carbon credit benefits but I expect a premium on these technologies through on the carbon credits issued by the UNFCCC and their bodies. So there should be a floor price for these technologies, so that people, more and more people come forward and join and put up projects, put up fund in these technologies, so that actual transition to the newer and cleaner technologies happen actually. And the fourth and the last point which I expect from this COP28 discussions outcome is, of course, Pedro also touched upon this, that voluntary carbon market, it is going through a lot of turmoil recently due to quality issues, and a lot of clarity is not there. So I expect some clarity, some interplay, like Mr. Yuvaraj was also saying. Some clarity, some guidelines from the COP also should come on this, and so that without voluntary carbon market, this climate change discussions, they have no meaning. Only compliances cannot help us achieve our climate goals. So some guidelines on voluntary carbon market also should come, and should be accepted by all the governments. That's all. Thank you for hearing me out, and thank you, Mr. Manish.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Prashant, for the expectations of Tata Power or Tata Group from the COP28, and willingness to contribute to the climate change problem, global warming problem that we are facing. So at the last, now I request, although we are done with 1 hour session, I request to stay for additional 5 minutes. And if you have any question to ask to me or to other speakers, then kindly raise your hand through this specific Zoho software, and we will take up the same one by one. You may also write your questions at the Q&A section. So we'll start with first delegate, Mr. Manish. Yeah, can you please ask your question, Mr. Manish? Can you speak? Meanwhile, I will take a question that had been asked by Mr. Ajay. Solar energy generation expedition may put environmental burden on account of absolute components, specifically that means their disposal. Is there any plan to mitigate this menace? Dinesh. Emerging technologies. Okay, so that is another question. So this one, this is the first question, which is related to solar energy generation. Expedition may put environmental burden on account of absolute component. Is there any plan to mitigate this specific problem? So, Mr. Tiwari, would you like to answer this question?
Yeah, sorry, I missed the question. Can you please repeat?
Yeah, so the question is solar energy generation expedition may put environmental burden on account of absolute components, that means their disposal. Is there any plan to mitigate this problem?
Yeah, so thank you for asking this question. This question has been there for a few years, and we hear this question in all the discussions we go. Actually, I see this as an opportunity rather than a problem. See, you look at the history. Challenges have been there, and there have been solutions, and each new solution brings a new risk. The mankind is so clever and or so skilled that it overcomes that challenge, and it moves on. Be it plastics. At a time, there was actually issue of packaging, of having cheap food or things or methods to carry things. So plastic was brought on. Now plastic has become a menace. Everybody is struggling with it. Of course, many industries are coming up with ways of recycling the plastic. Many are actually getting successful. Similar case is there for solar also. In solar generation, there was actually we have come to a point where we cannot sustain our traditional way of generating electricity. Coal sources, our oil sources are depleting. So we need to come with new solutions. Solar is the solution for today for one problem. Of course, it is creating another risk. So, but my point here is, even Tata Power also, other companies also are working on the solutions. Don't worry, the solar panels, they have a life of more than 25 years. Warranties are for 25 years. They live for more than 25 years. It has not a problem today. It will not a problem for next 10 years. But within next 4-5 years, we are close to breakthroughs. Next 4-5-6-8 years, we'll be able to come out with some solutions which can recycle those panels coming out of the plants. So I see it as an opportunity, a new business opportunity for some new players going forward. But it is solving a bigger problem than creating than what it's creating today.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for answering this question. Another one is, we will take only 2 additional questions. Another question is, what are your views on the digitization or tokenization of credits in India? Any prominent players or ventures stepping into this space? So probably Mr. Mr. Dinesh, Mr. Yuvaraj, Dinesh, maybe. Yeah. Would you like to answer this question?
Yeah, so definitely as I mentioned to you, this is the next important area that everybody is going to spend a lot of time and attention. So therefore, India, as you know, Digital India Initiative, everything under the sun in India is being now digitalized, whether you like it or not. And therefore, the carbon market is also going to move to the next level of digitalization. So that is for sure. And in India, many players are already engaged in the digital MRV. So the ultimate object of digital MRV is not just send data on the digitalization aspect of it, but the end goal is to create digital carbon credits, which is basically the tokens. As you know, the challenge in India is about the regulatory aspect of how the blockchain-related crypto are being treated. And therefore, there's going to be a lot of education and awareness that is required for the policymakers and the regulatory bodies, so that the carbon market can get the best benefit of the digital MRV towards tokenization. as we speak, even we are talking about tokenization of ITMOs. We are not even seeing normal ITMOs being issued in a regular manner, but people are even talking about tokenization of ITMOs. So therefore, that is going to be the very prominent topic. And in terms of players, you would always see the kind of emerging and the established carbon consultants who are going to engage in these type of areas. I don't have any specific names, but worldwide there are so many players. If you could very easily search, you'd be able to find. I don't want to mention any name to showcase that I'm supporting them, but there are many players who have already established their presence into the space. There are specific players who are only focusing on providing the tokenization services. And there is an entity called Carbon Place, which is a combination of all the banks that have come together to provide a marketplace for such kind of tokens, and also to provide the kind of custodian services for the tokenization of credit. So there are many international institutions who are already starting to establish proof of concept. But for India, we need more engagement with the policy and the regulatory makers before we talk about tokenization of credits. Thank you, Manish.
Thank you. The last question is, will EU new draft legislation on carbon offset affect the carbon market negatively? So maybe Pedro, would you like to answer this?
This is excellent question.
Yeah, so the question is, will EU new draft legislation on carbon offset affect, probably it's CBAM, affect the carbon market negatively?
Yeah, considering the CBAM, I wouldn't say that this would affect the voluntary carbon market because eventually voluntary carbon credits are not considered under the EU ETS. And then eventually if companies are investing this abroad, it wouldn't make any difference. But in terms of, for example, carbon price instruments, I would say that CBAM is kind of an instrument that can help to promote this worldwide, because parties would like to have a carbon price instrument to show that the products that they are eventually exporting to the European Union, they are already being taxed or eventually paying a carbon price domestically, and the revenues from these taxes would be reinvested domestically and not being charged at the border in the European Union. So eventually, this could be a push for new carbon price instruments, but not necessarily impact the voluntary carbon market, I would say.
Pedro, thanks for this information. So now we are looking to close this webinar. Thank you to all the speakers for sharing very good and insightful information related to carbon markets in COP28, and thank you to the delegates for joining this webinar. If you have any further queries, connect with us at this email ID or visit our website, and also the QR code is there. If you are looking to get the PPT copy via email, then requested to process the same through this QR code. So thank you very much again for joining this webinar. Looking forward to meet you at COP28, and post COP28 also we'll be doing the summary session. So it is being recommended to join the upcoming webinars that we will do organize. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Manish.
Thank you.
Sure. Bye.